Senator Leyonhjelm.
Mr. Acting Deputy President, I understand it's Senate Notice of Motion number 2. Is that correct? Yes.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, I move the business of the Senate Notice of Motion number 2, standing in my name for today. This motion would prevent the Environment Minister, Greg Hunt, from moving African lions from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, known as the CITES Treaty. Mr Hunt's decision to move African lions to Appendix 1 is made under provisions of the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. It will have the effect of banning the importation of all African lion specimens into Australia, including those legally and sustainably harvested under fair chase conditions. This is ministerial overreach in a most authoritarian manner. It seeks to curtail activities in a foreign country based on the minister finding it distasteful. This is not the kind of governance Australians need. Disapproval is not a basis for government policy, and governments have to accept the fact that people do not want them interfering in their lives. Supposedly, the minister's decision was motivated by a genuine attempt to help reduce the unethical practice of canned hunting by not allowing the import of into Australia of lion specimens obtained in this manner. The problem is the ban will bring to an end the substantial financial support that Australian hunters provide to poor African villages via hunting fees paid in the course of legally harvested, free-range, fair chase hunting. The regulation that this motion seeks to disallow does not distinguish between lion trophies gained through such hunting and trophies gained through canned hunting. But this is not the full explanation. Greg Hunt's decision was motivated by an intense personal dislike of hunting per se, promoted by animal rights activists who had been lobbying Liberal Party MPs. Canned hunting was just a convenient shroud to mask a ban on the importation of all lion hunting trophies. Documents obtained under Freedom of Information reveal multiple errors by the Environment Department in its advice to the Minister. This advice was a mass of misinformation and obfuscation, as I shall show with 3 examples. First, the ministerial brief stated that canned hunting is allowed in South Africa. This is simply not true. Canned hunting was explicitly prohibited by South Africa's Threatened or Protected Species Regulations in February 2007. Second, the ministerial brief stated that African lions meet the criteria for listing on CITES Appendix 1. This is also not true. A comprehensive report prepared for the CITES Animals Committee meeting in May 2014 expressly stated that the African lion does not meet any of the 3 biological criteria required for listing on Appendix 1 and is appropriately listed in Appendix 2. Third, the ministerial brief stated that a precautionary approach in relation to lion conservation decisions was warranted due to uncertainty regarding the lion's population size and distribution. This is also not true. The report to the CITES Animals Committee again expressly stated that precautionary measures are unnecessary because adequate information to assess the status of African lion and the impact of trade already existed. The report, a product of systematic analysis of the most recent scientific available, stated that the population of African lions is not small, according to the accepted CITES definition. The species does not have a restricted area of distribution, and there has not been a marked decline in the population according to the accepted CITES criteria. Jason Wood, the Liberal MP for Latrobe who lobbied Minister Hunt to implement the ban, is an outspoken opponent of canned hunting. Unfortunately, Mr Wood has, either by design or ignorance, failed to differentiate canned hunting from hunting wild lions. If Mr Wood read the Biodiversity Management Plan for the lion, recently released by the South African government for public comment, he would see that canned hunting of lions is in no way comparable to hunting wild lions. It is curious. Mr Wood steadfastly refuses to accept the collective professional expertise of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, but instead accepts anti-hunting dogma from animal rights activists. Well-managed trophy hunting is fully supported and endorsed by the IUCN, the CITES Treaty and the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD. Australia is a signatory to all three agencies. These respected agencies all recognise that well-managed trophy hunting is sustainable, generates much-needed funds for wildlife conservation and anti-poaching programs, and provides employment and an income for thousands of low-income people living in rural Africa. Just recently, in the last few days in fact, Zimbabwe lifted restrictions on big game hunting imposed after the killing of Cecil the lion, no doubt recognising that the ban was counterproductive to furthering the conservation of big game and deprived local communities of much-needed income. Minister Hunt's decision to ban the importation of African lion is not only an act of cultural imperialism, but a suppression of sustainable use, a central tenet of effective conservation held dear by the IUCN, CITES and the Convention on Biological Diversity. If Mr Hunt is so affronted by the concept of sustainable use, then perhaps he should withdraw Australia as a signatory to these organisations. Finally, Mr Acting Deputy President, I want to read a few comments about Minister Hunt's ban from two of Australia's internationally recognised professional wildlife management experts. Professor Michael Archer at the School of Biological, Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of New South Wales, commenting on Hunt's announcement, said this, and I quote, "While all his prayers and ill-informed comments are probably well-intentioned, he clearly has no idea that IUCN advocates conservation through sustainable use strategies as demonstrably among the most important compatible conservation strategies. In stopping sustainable hunting, many vital programs that would continue to have positive conservation outcomes, with wildlife being valued and hence cared for by local communities, will collapse. At some point, this wisdom, which is in fact promoted by IUCN, must sink in to people like the Minister, who appear to have no understanding about the importance of conservation through sustainable use." Professor Graham Webb, founder of Wildlife Management in Darwin, said, and again I quote, "Mike Archer is 100% correct in his assessment. The real question is whether Minister Hunt is aware of the reality and chose to ignore it, or whether he is not aware of the reality and simply waded into the issue in ignorance. Another dark day for science-based and evidence-based conservation." End of quote. Mr Acting Deputy President, today I have outlined the ill-informed basis on which this decision has been made and how Minister Hunt has turned his back on scientific evidence and fact. Science and evidence must prevail over misleading emotive rhetoric, which has served conservation matters so poorly in the past. For the sake of lions and their survival, I urge senators to support the disallowance motion.
Thank you, Senator Leyonhjelm. Senator Ingram.
Thank you.
Sorry for the confusion, 2 jumped. And I can count that far, but I wasn't quite sure I had called the right one. Senator Ingram.
Thank you. Mr Acting Deputy President, I rise in favour of protecting the African lion and other animals by supporting the ban on importing and exporting trophies. I congratulate the Honourable Greg Hunt, Minister for the Environment, for his stance on this important issue. And one of the measurements of a society is how we treat animals, regardless of how powerful or agile they may be. They have little protection against a rifle or other human weapons, and even less protection when placed in a fenced-off area. We want to be seen as a modern 21st century developed nation who has a raft of animal welfare laws. But now some of us want to ignore what happens in other countries and to encourage cruelty and the unnecessary killing in the name of sport. But I ask Mr Acting Deputy President, where is the sport in canned hunting? One can hardly call himself or herself a hunter if the animal is lured, baited or caged. We are all horrified at the greyhound racing live baiting scandal, and we were all shocked by the appalling treatment of animals in Australia, and yet some not only want to turn a blind eye to what happens outside Australia, they now want to be allowed to bring their gruesome trophies back into the country. For those who state conservation and the need to cull, while at times are legitimate, needs to be undertaken by properly managed programs in the hands of professionals who have no need to boast about hunting canned animals. And for those who state that income goes to aid in the development of developing nations, feel free to donate to charities, feel free to go and volunteer and bring back pictures of wild animals and not trophies of misery. I am sure $50,000 will go a long way in a school or a village. Build much-needed infrastructure rather than exchange of money for endangered species life. Development does not come from a quick buck. It comes from hard work that a community can take pride in and own. Hunting, canned or otherwise, does not create a local resilient industry, does not give villages future direction, does not encourage localised economic development, and certainly does not create civic pride. Economic participation is zero. It creates another form of welfare, where a cash grant is given to a community for them to essentially do little, other than provide some accommodation and a guide. That is not development. It is not nation building. It is not capability development. It is welfare based on cruelty to animals. Money not well earned is potentially money not well spent. What is there to stop basic human greed when animal after animal is sold by communities making a quick, easy buck? The only need to overstate the amount of animals available to have permission to sell wild animals for hunting, while all the time not having to look to the future and develop inclusive industries for their communities. With so many people finding out this abhorrent, it will not encourage a broad-based tourism industry with greater employment potential. Canned hunting, where a lion is bred in captivity, becomes reliant on humans for food and even grows to trust humans. It is contained in a fenced-off area and is placed in a position where death is a certainty. This is not sport. It's not a skill. It is unfair, it is unethical, a vile killing and nothing else. What comes after canned hunting, Mr Acting Deputy President? Wild hunting, and when you can't find game fairly, you unfairly find game? To say that it's a well-regulated industry is a fallacy. With no disrespect to those developing nations, we have seen that the rule of law struggles in many of these countries. And naturally, they will prioritise their struggling law enforcement resources to human populations, leaving their wildlife as a low priority. We, as a developed nation, have a duty to support the law of enforcement to proactively, actively assist prosecute illegal activities. While we have recently seen evidence that hunting is not a well-regulated activity, when a male lion known as Cecil was lured away from his sanctuary, shot with an arrow, wounded and in pain for 40 hours, tried vainly to survive, while a trophy hunter returned to his camp, had a meal, had a good night's sleep, only to return the next day to finish off his prey. How is this any different to any injured possum being thrown to the ground and laughed at? being used to blood a greyhound. Why is that not okay here in Australia, but perfectly fine when we step foot overseas? Let's be realistic. It does not take much to arrange documents claiming to be from a legal entity in a developing nation that states that the wanton killing was legal. It may even be from a legal entity, but inappropriately paid for. A line must be drawn in the savannah. This ban shows the world that we do not support this cruel and unethical practice. I stand in full support of maintaining the ban on bringing hunting trophies into Australia.
Thank you, Senator Lindgren. Senator Singh.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Labor does not support this disallowance motion. Every year, foreign hunters export the carcasses of 665 wild lions from Africa, an average of nearly 2 lions every day. In Zimbabwe, the country where Cecil the lion was killed just last month, hunters exported 49 lion trophies in 2013 alone. Since Cecil's death in early July, it's likely that at least a dozen other lions have been shot by trophy hunters. Banning the import and export of lion specimens, implemented following robust public consultation, is an important step towards greater protection of the African lion and is welcomed by Labor. A century ago, there were some 200,000 African lions prowling the savannah. Now, according to the last complete assessment in 2012, there are as few as 32,000 left. So that's 200,000 down to 32,000, living on less than 20% of the land that they used to roam on. They're considered vulnerable by the IUCN Red List, and last October the US Fish and Wildlife Services proposed to list the species as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Labor believes it is effectively impossible to justify the continued hunting of a species that has declined by more than 80% in the past 50 years by invoking benefits to local communities and by mentioning that areas leased to hunters increase the scope of habitat available to wildlife beyond that available in protected areas. So therefore, Labor cannot support this disallowance of the ban of importing lion specimens or lion hunting trophies, because research has also shown us time and time again that trophy hunting of African lions is a threat to the survival of lions in the wild. On top of that, it simply does not flow that there are any social or economic benefits of trophy hunting to local communities. I am aware of awful reports that travelling Australian wildlife volunteers have unwittingly worked in African shelters to help hand-raise lions and other animals, later then used for canned hunting, where relatively tamed animals are lured before the waiting hunters with meat, then shot with rifles or crossbows. Personally, I find the act of hunting for pleasure or trophies unconscionable, and I find it sad that many trophy hunters resort to the default argument that killing animals is good for conservation. Countries that are active in the trophy hunting trade have seen the biggest decreases in lion populations, putting genuine conservation efforts at risk. Recent studies have shown that areas in which trophy hunting has been permitted by government authorities, lion populations have severely declined in the absence of other threats. Research has also found that the social and economic benefits of trophy hunting do not flow to local communities. Research published by the Pro-Hunting International Council for Game and Wildlife Conservation and the UN Food and Agriculture Organisation found that the hunting companies contribute only 3% of their revenue to communities living in hunting areas. And according to a 2013 report by the International Fund for Animal Welfare, trophy hunting accounts for 0.27% or less of the GDP of each African country in which it's conducted. Labor supports the appropriate use of powers under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act to further the protection of threatened and endangered species around the world, and therefore does not support this disallowance motion.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I'm going to put a different attitude to this, Mr Acting Deputy President. First of all, why would you want to shoot a lion? That'd be the last thing I'd want to shoot, but some people do. Mr Acting Deputy President, I remember back in the 70s when I'd shear 100 sheep a day, I'd get paid about $40. I bought myself a .17 calibre rifle, same calibre as an air rifle, specifically for shooting foxes. I'd go out and shoot 2 foxes a night and skin them. I'd get $40 for the 2 fox skins, the equivalent to a full day's shearing for me, given I was not a fast shearer, a gun shearer. 100 a day, 120 a day was about my limit in those days. Mr Acting Deputy President, people do go trophy hunting, shooting these animals. Now, I think it's a disgrace what happened to the lion Cecil, shot with an arrow, lured out of a national park, then left for 40 hours to be put out of its misery. That is a disgraceful act. No one should be shooting animals in national parks, especially over there, these lions, or I should say over there especially with lions and that to keep their numbers up. Canned hunting is a disgraceful act, Mr Acting Deputy President. It was banned years ago. Canned hunting is where they drug the lions and let them out of a cage and they have no hope of survival, and people shoot them and then bring the trophy back. That is just a terrible scheme. But this scheme that goes on these days is actually farmed lions. They might be in 10,000 acres of land. They might be past their breeding cycle. And someone might want to pay $50,000 to go over and shoot that lion and then have the animal stuffed and brought back to America or Australia, wherever they live. It's something I would never do. But the reason I think this regulation is over the top is it takes so much money out of those poor communities that actually rely on this sort of activity to put bread and butter or food, whatever they eat in those countries, I've never been to Africa, on their plates to look after very poor people, give them a job. And as I said, they are actually farmed. Canned hunting is a disgraceful thing. Luring animals out of national parks is disgraceful. As I said, I would never want to shoot a lion. I've shot many wild pigs and many foxes in my days, and will continue to do so. But it's the same situation, Mr Acting Deputy President. Imagine if you're out west of Queensland or western New South Wales and you had a station out there, and you had wild dogs crossed with dingoes and they're killing your sheep. If some American doctor came out and said, I'll pay you $50,000 to go and shoot that dingo on your property, I want the dingo gone, it's killing my sheep, I don't like them, they're nothing but animal killers, the dingoes, the way they prey on especially lambs and now calves, the terrible problem they have in Queensland when the wild dogs are actually killing the calves that are being born. Huge cost to agriculture, export, our food supply. But if they want to pay $50,000 and take the trophy home, then so be it. The reason I don't agree with this regulation for 2 reasons is: 1, it is taking money out of communities where they actually farm the lions, where they protect their numbers, where they actually run a business. Just like if I ran a business on my farm, Mr Acting Deputy President, if my wife and I, which we'd never do, allowed the wild pigs to breed up in numbers and charge people to come and shoot the wild pigs in our farm. I think wild pigs are tremendous damage to our country, nosing of the country, the soil erosion, the death of animals, the destruction of fences. They are a huge cost to our agriculture in Australia. But those people who do want to shoot these lions for trophy, if they play by the rules, then so be it. They're the rules of that country. As I said, it brings money into those places. It's something I would never ever do and never want to do. But I don't want to see us cutting money off. And what this does is, by not allowing the trophy to be brought back to Australia, still does not stop the lions being shot. That Australia can go over there and pay to shoot a lion that's farmed out in a 10,000 acre property, hunted down or whatever. I don't know why you want to do it, but people do want to do it. And it brings money there, but then they can't bring the trophy back, so that'll probably prevent them from doing it. So that'll leave it to those farm lions from other Western countries, wealthy people, to go over and do exactly that. The other problem I have is that Ray Hammond at Gower has informed me when the guillotine came down on the date the minister announced this, They couldn't bring the trophies already had, the lions already been shot. They wanted to bring the trophies back to Australia. That takes months to get an export permit out of a place like South Africa. By the time the lion is stuffed and prepared, then it might be 42 days to actually get the permit to bring it into Australia. Those trophies now not being brought here. The minister should have given extended time to allow those trophies to be brought here. They paid their money. But as I said, I would never want to shoot a lion or any such animal like that. But I do disagree in respect that it cuts money off to those people who farm these lions for a business. They rely on that money for income. They are very, very poor communities as a whole, Zimbabwe especially. We know how their economy's gone after their government for the last 10 years and the disgraceful things they've done. And that's why I have some reservations about this regulation. I won't be crossing the floor, I won't be supporting the disallowance. I just want to put on the record that people have the right to go to these farmed areas, not canned, not national parks, but where they actually farm these animals for an income. I see nothing wrong with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Williams. Senator Rhiannon.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Monday of this week was World Lion Day, a special day to celebrate the wonder of this majestic species. I think all of us have enjoyed lions in every way. They're just such an extraordinary animal, from storybooks for young children to enjoy wildlife movies, wildlife documentaries. There's many species in the world that are incredibly unique, but the lion figures in so much of mythology, childhood stories, scientific studies that have brought wonder and enjoyment to so many people. So I think it's very understandable that a World Lion Day has been established. And then we heard a few weeks ago about this shocking killing of this lion, Cecil, that has moved and mobilised so many people around the world. And why were they mobilised? Because of such extreme cruelty done to one animal. And I think that speaks volumes, that people do care and that they would value and do value when governments like the present government makes this change to regulations, so there is increased protection for this important species. So we have this disallowance before us, and the Greens will certainly not be supporting it. I think if the mover, Senator David Leyonhjelm, had any decency, he would have withdrawn this disallowance, particularly after what happened with Cecil the lion. I mean, that really did highlight public opinion. It highlighted how important this change is, the change that he now wants to disallow with his attempt to change that section of the EPBC Act. Now, it is worth, and other members have spoken in the debate on aspects of how this industry works, and indeed it is an industry. It has nothing to do with conservation. People who are promoting this canned hunting and how the spin-offs that are associated with it uses issues to do with conservation as cover, but that's certainly not the intent here, and it actually works in completely the opposite direction. So first off, a few comments on canned hunting. I think people have heard that canned hunting is described as shooting fish in a tub or in a barrel. Because that's just to try and get it across to people. It is not hunting. It is something that has been manufactured. So, and it's largely what we're talking about here is rich white men going to these countries, shooting elephants, rhinoceroses, I understand, lions, probably other extraordinary species that one finds in Africa, shooting them so they know that they will get a result, they will be able to kill the animal. Then they stuff the parts of the animal, the paws of the lion, I understand, its head. In the case of elephants, even their feet, part of their feet is stuffed so they might become tables that you've got. I just find the whole thing extraordinary that people could see that that's something that they would want to do. And I certainly can't call it a sport. I can barely call it even hunting. And that's why people have come up with this description of canned hunting. And again, to emphasise, there is no conservation benefits in this. It is actually a negative in terms of conservation and no benefits to local communities. And I noticed the earlier speaker, Senator John Williams, made out about the benefits that go to local communities. He had no basis, no evidence to back that up. So I think it's important that how the impact that it does have on local communities is set out. First off, research published by the Pro-Hunting International Council for Game and Wildlife Conservation and also the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organisation, and this has been supported by other researchers in the area, has found that hunting companies contribute only 3% of their revenue to communities living in hunting areas. And in many cases, remember that's obviously an average, in many cases there might be some higher, but there's a lot much lower. The vast majority of their expenditure does not accrue to local people and businesses. What we find is that the firms involved, government agencies that might be trying to drive this, and some individuals who are looking to make a profit out of it, have few links to local communities near lion habitats. This is quick money, often big money, for those pushing behind the companies, and the locals are left even in a worse situation, often with the lion's habitat destroyed. So, as we know, it's often also called as well as canned hunting, trophy hunting. Now, trophy hunting advocates present the industry as very large. They cite figures as high as $200 million in annual revenue. But in the context of national economies, we're talking about Africa here, the industry is tiny, contributing at best a fraction of a % of the GDP. Now, nature-based tourism does play a significant role in national development, and this is where countries like Australia can be assisting countries in Africa to develop that side of their tourism. And that is the way this should be going. This is a debate we shouldn't be having in the 21st century. This is a big white hunter going off to Africa and killing these majestic species. Should have ended long ago. The nature-based tourism, as I said, does play a significant role. And across the countries that have been investigated, while trophy hunting revenue was only 1.8% of tourism revenue, the nature tourism is increasing, is bringing increasing amounts of financial benefits to local communities. Now, conservationists and many MPs in countries, particularly across Europe, are pushing for the European Union to ban the import of lion parts, the heads, the paws, the skins, as trophies from African countries. Sadly, it's not just lions, I said before, that have got this problem. The situation for elephants remains very serious. European Union has banned trophy hunting imports of elephants from Tanzania and Mozambique, and I understand that that there also is bans in Botswana. Unfortunately, the European Union has not placed a full ban on trophy hunting, and that is a campaign that continues. I do congratulate Botswana government, a country that is very poor, that it has brought in a self-imposed ban on trophy hunting, which further confirmed that after the death of the lion Cecil. So this is a huge campaign, and again, I do congratulate the government for taking this action. We needed this change to the law, and why did we need it? We needed it not just because of issues of cruelty, but for issues literally about the future of this species. There are 32,000 lions left in Africa. North Africa no longer has lions. They're already extinct in that part of that huge continent. The numbers in West Africa are in the hundreds, possibly 500. In Central Africa and East Africa, and Southern Africa, they are obviously higher. But 32,000 overall is not a huge number of species, and a huge number of individuals for this species. And you heard earlier from an earlier speaker in this debate that this species has gone from being classified as vulnerable to classified as threatened. and the lion population is in serious decline. This is an issue that should concern us all of us. And I think that if anybody stops to think about it, you would have to think this is shocking. You know, while the lion is not our native species, so many of us, we've grown up with lions in our children's books, just reading about lions, just appreciating this is a creature at the head of the food chain in Africa that, you know, certainly I think does engender some fear at times, understandably. You know, they're tough species, looking after their young. But you know, the wonder of life that's encapsulated in the lion is the lion species is something that we shouldn't threaten in any way, and certainly trophy hunting does that. Now, a few more details just about this industry, because when I read about and then saw the tragedy about Cecil the lion, I checked out some of the issues that were going down with this industry, and it really is deeply shocking, where lions are being bred purely for people to come along and kill them. Now, that is not hunting at all. I don't think hunting of the wild animals should occur in any form, but when they are captured in a certain area and there's absolute guarantee that the big white hunter can come in and kill off a few of these majestic big cats, it's so wrong. Now, research that's been done in this area has found that there are 160 farms in parts of southern Africa that are legally breeding more than 5,000 big cats per annum purely for this canned hunting market. Now, I mean, really, that is quite sick, really, really sick. In South Africa in 2012, canned hunting was so popular it generated $70 million US dollars, but again, barely any of that money stays with local communities. This is money that is quickly going overseas or to big companies in Johannesburg and other key parts of South Africa. Regulation of this industry is virtually non-existent. Really, what it comes down to, if you've got the money to pay, you buy a sort of dodgy permit and you can go off and shoot these animals. So what happens? You shoot the animal, you take the skin, you take the head, you've got your trophy, you go home, I guess you put it on your wall, you invite your friends over. I mean, really. But there is also other aspects. It's not just trophy. There is also a trade in the bones of these animals. The lion bone trade is part of a lucrative medicine market in China and parts of Southeast Asia. And the concern here is that the canned hunting market of lions is actually providing cover for an illegal trade in wild lion bones and tiger bones also. So again, very worrying aspect of how this industry is playing out. Then there's even another aspect. Many of you would have heard about the puppy farms in Australia. Well, we now have cub farms as a spin-off of this industry. And this is to supply lion cubs. You know, how cute are little lion cubs? You do want to cuddle them. They're absolutely gorgeous. So I can understand that people want to go along and pat a little lion cub. But what we have as part of this industry is that people are breeding up the cubs, so people come along, pay good money, they can bring their children along, and they pat a lion cub, pat many lion cubs. It's a tourism attraction. They actually have these petting parks. Now, it's presented again that this is something wonderful for conservation because these poor little lion cubs have been orphaned and now we need to ensure we conserve the species. So come along, you know, you can pet a little lion cub, we're looking after it, implication it'll go back out to the wild. Now, virtually none of those lion cubs go back out to the wild, and by far the majority of them have been bred specifically to go to these petting farms. Something, again, that is very abusive, done in the name of conservation, but at factory farming at its worst. Also, what happens to the mothers, the lionesses? They are, like with the puppy farms here, very unnatural in terms of the way those lionesses are treated. Often they're giving birth to 2 and 3 litters per year, which is well beyond the pattern of a lioness in the wild. Again, you know, deeply wrong. And then what happens is that the breeders remove the cubs from the mother lionesses at a very early age, so disrupting the whole natural way that these prides of these most beautiful animals live. And in cases I've read that the cubs can be taken off the mother within an hour. Now, that is actually another form of cruelty. It was cruelty in the way Cecil was shot, cruelty in the way the whole notion of canned farming, canned shooting and hunting is undertaken, and cruel in the way this spin-off, another part of the industry, is undertaken with the way these lionesses are treated. So I did notice when the mover of this disallowance, Senator David Leyonhjelm, spoke. He spoke and used the terms that the people who are against canned hunting, that they have this intense personal dislike, was the words he used about hunting. That's actually quite an abusive term, which is again trying to misrepresent these people. Yes, we do strongly oppose canned hunting, but think about why that's done. That's not some intense personal thing. It's actually very objective. And it's very objective because what we're saying is that these animals should not be treated so cruelly, where they're bred purely to be shot for the pleasure of somebody who's got the money to be able to kill these animals in a very easy way, where they'll get their shot sooner or later and they will then be able to cut up this animal and take it home in body parts. That's what people are objecting to. It's very objective in terms of how they've made their decision. Yes, they might feel very concerned and upset by it, but it is certainly a judgment that they have made on a very reasoned basis. And it's also a judgment that's been made for biodiversity reasons. We know the loss of species around the world, a loss of our glorious biodiversity. And all of us should take a stand on that. And that's another reason people are speaking out against the cruelty to lions and other wildlife in Africa, and why all of us should support this, should vote against this disallowance. Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President.
Senator Ruston.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I'd just like to make a short contribution to this disallowance motion. As Senator Leyonhjelm, when she made her contribution, so clearly articulated, I think society is judged by the way we treat our animals, and to shoot or maim an animal for entertainment is a pretty sad indictment on mankind. And to suggest this is okay because the animals are actually bred for this specific purpose, I think to some degree actually makes it worse. To have an artificial environment created where you put animals in a confined space, you make them behave in a way that's unnatural to how they would behave in the wild, and then to turn around and shoot them for sport, I think is one of the most heinous things I can possibly think of. And society accepts that the humane use of animals for food and for clothing is an acceptable thing to do. And I think we all accept the fact that we have to eat and we have to be clothed, and that using animals for a purpose and a specific purpose, as long as they are reared and killed in a humane way, is something that society accepts. Society does not accept canned hunting, and I can't see that there'll ever be a time when society does. I think what we've heard today from the contributions of others that have risen and spoken on this particular disallowance motion and against the position that's put forward by Senator Leyonhjelm to say that this practice should be allowed to continue and that we should continue to import the byproduct of this activity, I think have been very good. It is an apparent activity. And even thinking of things like duck hunting, which have received quite a lot of adverse publicity in this country, is better than this. At least the animal gets to live in the wild and gets a sporting chance, and at least the hunter's intent is to take that animal home or that bird home to eat it. This is not the case with the canned hunting. But it's not just about lions, Mr Acting Deputy President. It's about any animal that is slaughtered, killed, maimed, teased or tormented for the purpose of sport. This is the thing that we should be condemning. Any country in the world, any person on this earth who thinks it's okay to kill, maim, hurt or scare an animal for the simple pleasure of a sport without any intention whatsoever for needing that animal to use it for food, I think is an absolute disgrace. So I condemn the farming of wild animals for the purpose of killing them for sport, and I commend the Minister for the action that he's taken in moving this particular regulation, and I support the Minister's action, and I support every other speaker today who stood up in support of banning the importation of this particular byproduct into Australia.
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister.
Thanks, Mr Acting Deputy President. Mr Acting Deputy President, I rise to address some of the issues in relation to this disallowance motion on behalf of the government. Mr Acting Deputy President, the regulation in question before the chamber is one that means that African lions will be treated as though they are listed under Appendix 1 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. This convention, known as CITES Convention, is a convention in which Australia is one of some 180 signatories to it. CITES is specifically aiming to ensure that international trade in wild animals and plants does not threaten their survival. Approximately 5,600 species of animals and 30,000 species of plants are listed under the CITES Convention. Species are listed on one of 3 appendices to CITES, according to how threatened they have become through trade. Appendix 1 is the most restrictive list and is applied to the species most threatened by trade. Australia's national environment law, the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999, gives effect to the requirements of the CITES Convention. In accordance with CITES and the EPBC Act, Australia may introduce stricter domestic measures that restrict trade in certain CITES-listed species. The mechanism for giving effect to a decision to put in place a stricter domestic measure for a CITES-listed species is a declaration in a legislative instrument. Such legislative instrument is, of course, disallowable, and that is what we're debating today. The instrument that was created by Minister Hunt in relation to the importation of African lion parts that Senator Leyonhjelm has moved a disallowance motion on. Mr Acting Deputy President, this has come about because of genuine community concern, and I do want to acknowledge in this debate the member for Latrobe who is in the chamber, Mr Jason Wood. The member for Latrobe campaigned and argued passionately and campaigned extensively for this regulation to be brought in for this protection of African lions. And he deserves all credit for that, and obviously is passionate enough about it that he has come to the chamber to witness this debate around the proposed disallowance of the regulation. The government does not support the disallowance. We obviously stand by the decision taken by Minister Hunt at the encouragement of the member for Latrobe and others, because we believe that it is important as a government to offer this additional protection to African lion species. This will prevent the trade in African lion parts except for a limited number of circumstances, such as scientific or conservation purposes. Extensive consultation on the ban was undertaken by Minister Hunt and the government more generally with the African lion range states, businesses, hunters, conservation organisations and researchers. Existing measures in South Africa do not prohibit canned hunting of African lions. South Africa prohibits canned hunting of a number of species including leopards and cheetahs, but not lions. Canned hunting, as has been discussed in the chamber, is when lions are raised in some form of captivity and hunted within fenced enclosures, where the odds, of course, are stacked in favour of the hunter. Of the 18 African lion specimens imported to Australia as hunting trophies for both commercial and personal use between 2010 and 2013, all originated from South Africa, where the canned hunting of lions is not prohibited, and 15 were declared as being captive bred. Department of Environment Analysis concluded that other options to specifically target canned hunting would not be effective given the challenges in determining whether a specimen was obtained through canned hunting versus other measures. And because canned hunting, we believe, is a deplorable activity, we took this action as a government to protect African lions from this barbaric practice, by banning the import and export of trophies through use of this regulatory measure. This practice can hardly be called hunting, as other speakers have considered, let alone be called a sport. It is cruel and barbaric, and we want it to be a thing of the past. And we've seen, of course, more recently, as other speakers acknowledged, the public outrage that has followed the killing of Cecil the lion in Zimbabwe. Australians do not support this type of brutal activity of these majestic creatures. The ban importantly sends a signal to the international community that we do not support this cruel and unethical practice. Many major international airlines have joined the fight against this trade, with Lufthansa, Emirates, British Airways, American Airlines, United Airlines and Delta Air all banning hunting and trophy shipments. It has attracted international attention, with members of the EU Parliament calling upon their jurisdiction to take a lead from Australia, and has of course brought attention to the issue of canned hunting within South Africa as well. So, Mr Acting Deputy President, I welcome the contribution of many speakers from different sides in this debate where they have indicated their support for the government's strong actions to protect African lions. I welcome the fact that their indications suggest that Senator Leyonhjelm's motion will be unsuccessful, as it should be, and I urge all senators to vote against this motion to ensure that the ban on hunting, on the importation of these parts of African lions remains in place, and that we actually send a very strong message of support from this Senate for this ban, and a very strong message that we will not condone this unfair, unethical and barbaric treatment of lions.
Thank you, Minister. If there are no further speakers, the question is that the motion put by Senator Leyonhjelm be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? No. The noes have it. The clerk.